Beside Freddy, Archie Perlmutter slept deeper into coma. Inside his lower intestine, in this rich dump of discarded food and worn-out dead cells, something for the first time opened its black eyes. Two stone posts marked the entrance of the vast acreage surrounding the Quabbin Reservoir. Beyond them, the road closed down to what was essentially a single lane. And Henry had a sense of having come full circle. This wasn't Massachusetts, but Maine. And although the sign said Quabbin Access, it was really the deep cut road all over again. He actually found himself looking up at the leaden sky, half expecting to see the dancing lights. What he saw instead was a bald eagle, soaring almost close enough to touch. It landed on the lower branch of a pine tree and watched them go by. Duddits raised his head from where it had lain against the cool glass and said, "Is there a walking now?" Henry's heart leaped. "Owen, did you hear?" "I heard," Owen said, and pressed the Humvee a little harder. The wet snow beneath them was as treacherous as ice, and with the state roads behind them, there was now only a single set of tracks leading north toward the reservoir. "We'll be leaving on our own set," Henry thought. "If Kurtz gets this far, he won't need telepathy." Duddits groaned, clutched his middle, and shivered all over. "Inni, I'm sick! Duddits sick!" Henry brushed Duddits' hairless brow, not liking the heat of the skin. What came next? Seizures, probably. A big one might take Duddits off in a hurry, given his weakened condition. And God knew that might be a mercy. The best thing. Still, it hurt to think of it. Henry Delvin, the potential suicide, and instead of him, the darkness had swallowed his friends, one by one. "You hang in there, Duds. Almost done now." But he had the idea the toughest part might still be ahead. Duddits' eyes opened again. "Is there a or ta?" "What?" Owen asked. "I didn't get that one." "He says Mr. Gray got stuck," Henry said, still brushing Duddits' brow, wishing there was a hair to brush, and remembering when they had been. Duddits' fine blonde hair. His crying had hurt them, had chopped into the heads like a dull blade. But how happy his laughter had made them. You heard Duddits give a laugh, and for a little while, you believed the old lies again, that life was good, that the lives of boys and men, girls and women had some purpose, that there was a light as well as darkness. "Why doesn't he just throw the goddamn dog into the reservoir?" Owen asked. His voice cracked with weariness. "Why does he feel that he has to go all the way to this shaft 12? Is it just because the Russian woman did?" "I don't think the reservoir is sure enough for him," Henry said. "The standpipe would have been good, but the aqueduct is even better. It's an intestine 65 miles long, and shaft 12 is a throat. Duddits, can we catch them?" Duddits looked at him from his exhausted eyes, then shook his head. Owen pounded his own thigh in frustration. Duddits wet his lips, spoke two words in a hoarse, near whisper. Owen heard them, but couldn't make them out. What? What did he say? "Only Jonesy." What does that mean? Only Jonesy what? Only Jonesy can stop him, I guess. The Hummer skidded again, and Henry grabbed a hold of the seat. The cold hand closed over his. Duddits was looking at him with desperate intensity. He tried to speak and began coughing instead. Gruesome, wet hacking sounds. Some of the blood that came out of his mouth was markedly lighter, frothy, and almost pink. Henry thought it was lung blood, and even while the cuffs shook him, Duddit's grip on Henry's hand didn't loosen. "Think it to me," Henry said. "Can you think it to me, Duds?" For a moment, there was nothing but Duddit's cold hand closed over his. Duddit's eyes locked on his. Then Duddit's and the khaki interior of the Humvee, with its faded scent of surreptitiously smoked cigarettes, was gone. In its place, Henry sees a pay telephone, the old-fashioned kind with different-sized holes on top, one for quarters, one for dimes, one for nickels. The rumble of men's voices and a clack-clacking sound, hauntingly familiar. After a moment, he realizes it's the sound of checkers on a checkerboard. He's looking at the payphone in Gosselin's, the one from which they called Duddit's after the death of Richie Granado. Jonesy made the actual call because he was the only one with a phone he could bill it to. The others gathered around, all of them still with their jackets on because it was cold in the store. Even living in the big woods with trees all around him, old man Gosselin wouldn't throw an extra log in the stove. What a fucking pisser. There were 2 signs over the phone. One reads, "Please limit all calls to 5 minutes." The other one. There was a crunching bang. Duddit's was thrown against the back of Henry's seat, and Henry was thrown into the dashboard. Their hands parted. Owen had skidded off the road and into the ditch. Ahead of them, the Subaru's tracks, fading now under fresh cover, ran off into the thickening snow. "Henry, you all right?" "Yeah, Duds, okay?" Duds nodded, but the cheek he had struck was turning black with amazing speed. "Your leukemia at work for you." Owen dropped the Humvee's transmission into low range and began to creep up the ditch. The Humvee was canted at a severe angle, maybe 30 degrees, but it rolled pretty well once Owen got it moving. "Fasten your seatbelt. First, fasten his, though." "He was trying to tell me, I don't give a damn what he was trying to tell you. This time we were all right. Next time we could roll 360. Fasten his belt, then your own." Henry did as he was told, thinking about the other sign over the payphone. What had it said? Something about Jonesy. Only Jonesy could stop Mr. Gray now. That was the gospel, according to Duddit's. What had that other sign said? Owen was forced to drop his speed to 20. It made him crazy to creep like this, but the wet snow was falling furiously now, and visibility was back to nearly 0. Just before the Subaru's tracks disappeared entirely, they came to the car itself, nose down in the water-carved ditch. Running across the road, passenger door open, rear wheels in the air. Owen stepped on the emergency brake, drew his Glock, opened his door. "Stay here, Henry," he said, and got out. He ran to the Subaru, bent low. Henry unlashed his seatbelt and turned to Duddit's, who was now sprawled against the back seat, gasping for breath, held in a sitting position only by the seatbelt. One cheek was a waxy yellow, the other had been engulfed by spreading blood under the skin. His nose was bleeding again, the wads of cotton sticking out of the nostrils, soaked and dripping. Duddit's, I'm so sorry," Henry said. "This is a fuckero." Duddit's nodded, then raised his arms. He could only hold them up for a few seconds, but to Henry, this meaning seemed obvious enough. Henry opened his door and got out just as Owen came running back, his Glock now stuffed in his belt. The air was so thick with snow, the individual flakes so huge, that breathing had become difficult. I thought I told you to stay where you were, Owen said. I only want to get in the back with him. Why? Henry spoke calmly enough, although his voice trembled slightly. Because he's dying, he said. He's dying, but I think he has one more thing to tell me first. Owen looked in the rearview mirror, saw Henry with his arms around Duddits, saw they were both wearing their seatbelts, and fastened his own. Hold him good, he said. There's going to be a hell of a dance. He reversed 100 feet, put the Hummer in low, and drove forward, aiming for the spot between the abandoned Subaru and the right-hand ditch. The crack in the head looked a little narrow on that side. There was indeed a hell of a jounce. Owen's seatbelt locked, and he saw Duddit's body leap in Henry's arms. Duddit's bald head bounced against Henry's chest. Then they were over the crack and once more rolling up East Street. Owen could just make out the last phantom shapes of shoe prints on the now white ribbon of the road. Mr. Gray was on foot, and they were still rolling. They could catch up before the bastard cut into the woods. But they didn't. With a final tremendous effort, Duddits raised his head. Now Henry saw with dismay and horror. Duddits' eyes were also filled with blood. Clack, clack, clack. The dry chuckles of the old men as someone accomplishes the fabled triple jump. The phone began to swim into this field of vision again, and the signs over it. Don't try, save your strength. But for what? For what if not this? The sign on the right. Please limit all calls to 5 minutes. Smells of tobacco, smells of wood smoke, and the old brine of pickles. His friend's arms around him, and the sign on the left. Call Jonesy now. Duddits, his voice floating in the darkness. Darkness, his old friend. Duddits, I don't know how. Duddits' voice came to him in a final time, very tired but calm. Quick, Henry, I can only hold on a little longer. You need to talk to him. Henry picks the telephone receiver out of its cradle. Thinks absurdly. But isn't the whole situation absurd? That he doesn't have the change. Not much in carrying a dime. Holds the phone to his ear. Roberta Cavell's voice comes. Impersonal and businesslike. Massachusetts General Hospital, how may I direct your call? Mr. Gray flailed Jonesy's body along the path which ran up the east side of the reservoir, from the point where East Street ended, slipping, falling, grabbing branches, getting up again. Jonesy's knees were lacerated, the pants torn open and soaked with blood. His lungs were burning, his heart beating like a steam hammer. Yet the only thing that concerned him was Jonesy's hip, the one he'd broken in the accident. It was a hot and throbbing ball, shooting pain all the way down the thigh to the knee, and up to the middle of his back along the road of his spine. The weight of the dog made things worse. It was still asleep, but the thing inside was wide awake, held in a place only by Mr. Gray's will. Once he was rising to his feet, the hip locked up entirely, and Mr. Gray had to beat it repeatedly with Jonesy's gloved fist to make it let go again. How much farther along the cursed, stifling, blinding, never-ending snow? And what was Jonesy up to? Anything. Mr. Gray didn't dare let go of the Byram's restless hunger. It had in nothing even approaching a mind long enough to go to the door of the locked room and listen. A phantom shape appeared ahead in the snow. Mr. Gray paused, gasping and peering at it, and then fought his way forward again, holding the dog's limp paws and dragging Jonesy's right foot. Here was a sign nailed to the trunk of a tree: absolutely no fishing from Shaft House. 50 feet beyond it, stone steps rose up from the path. 6 of them, no, 8. At the top was a stone building on a stone foundation that jutted out into the snowy grey nothing where the reservoir lay. Jonesy's ears could hear water lapping against stone even bore the rushing, labored beat of his heart. He had come to the place. Clutching the dog and using the last of Jonesy's depleted strength, Mr. Gray began to totter up the snow-covered steps. As they passed between the stone posts, marking the entrance to the reservoir, Kurt said, "Pull over, Freddy. Side to the road." Freddy did as he was asked, without question. "You got your auto, laddie?" Freddy lifted it. The good old M16, tried and true. Kurtz nodded. "Sidearm." "44 Magnum, boss." And Kurtz with the 9, which he liked for close work. He wanted this to be close work. He wanted to see the color of Owen Underhill's brains. "Freddy." "Yes, boss." "I just want you to know that this is my final mission, and I couldn't have hoped for a finer companion." He reached out and gave Freddy's shoulder a squeeze. Beside Freddy, Perlmutter snowed with his ma-jode face tipped up towards the roof. 5 minutes or so before reaching the stone pillars, he had passed several long, spectacularly odoriferous farts. After that, Pearlie's distended gut had gone down again. Probably for the last time, Kurtz thought. Freddy's eyes, meanwhile, had grown gratifyingly bright. Kurtz was delighted. He had not entirely lost his touch, even now, it seemed. "All right, Buck," Kurtz said. "Full speed ahead and damn the torpedoes, right?" "Right, sir." Kurtz guessed Sir was okay again now. He could pretty well put the protocols of the missions behind them. They were Quantrill's boys now, 2 final Jayhawkers, riding the western Massachusetts range. With an unmistakable little grimace of distaste, Freddy jerked a thumb at Perlmutter. "Want me to try wake him up, sir? He may be too far gone, but—" "Why bother?" Kurtz asked, still gripping Freddy's shoulder. He pointed ahead, where the access road disappeared into a wall of white. The snow. The goddamn snow that had chased them all this way. A grim fucking reaper dressed in white instead of black. The tracks of the Subaru were now entirely gone, but those of the Humvee Owen had stolen were still visible. If they moved along briskly, praise God, following these tracks would be a walk in the park. "I don't think we need him anymore, which I personally find a great relief." "Go, Freddy, go!" The Humvee flirted her tail and then steadied. Kurtz drew his 9 and held it against his leg. "Coming for you, Owen. Coming for you, Buck. And you better get your speech ready, for God. Because you're going to be making it just about an hour from now." The office, which he had furnished so beautifully, furnished out of his mind and his memories, was now falling apart. Jonesy limped restlessly back and forth, looking around the room, lips pressed so tightly together they were white, forehead beaded with sweat, even though it had gotten damned cold in here. This was the fall of the office of Jonesy instead of the house of Usher. The furnace was howling and clanking beneath him, making the floor shake. White stuff, frost crystals maybe, puffed in through the wind and left a powdery, triangular shape on the wall. Where it touched, it went to work on the wood paneling, simultaneously rotting it and warping it. The pictures fell one by one, tumbling to the floor like suicides. The Ames chair, the one he had always wanted, the very one, split in two as if it had been hacked by an invisible axe. The mahogany panels on the walls began to split and peel free like dead skin. The drawers jutted out of their places in the desk and clattered one by one to the floor. The shutters Mr. Gray had installed to block his view of the outside world were vibrating and shaking, producing a steady metallic squalling that set Jonesy's teeth on edge. Crying out to Mr. Gray, demanding to know what was going on, would be useless. And besides, Jonesy had all the information he needed. He had slowed Mr. Gray down, but Mr. Gray had first risen to the challenge and then above it. Viva Mr. Gray, who had either reached his goal or almost reached it. As the paneling fell off the walls, he could see the dirty sheetrock beneath. The walls of the Tracker brothers' office, as four boys had seen it in 1978, lined up with their foreheads to the glass, a new chum standing behind them as bidden, waiting for them to be done with whatever it was they were doing, waiting for them to take him home. Now another wood panel tore loose, coming off the wall like the sound of a tearing paper. And beneath it was a bulletin board with a single photo, a Polaroid, tacked to it. Not a beauty queen, not Tina Jean Schlossinger, but just some woman with her skirt hiked up to the bottom of her panties. Pretty stupid. The nice rug on the floor suddenly shriveled like skin, revealing dirty Tracker brothers' tile beneath. And those white tadpoles, scumbags left by couples who came in here to screw beneath the disinterested gaze of the Polaroid woman, who was no one really, just an artifact of a hollow past. He paced, lurching on his bad hip, which hadn't hurt this badly since after the accident, and he understood all of this. Oh yes, indeed. You had better believe it. His hip was full of splinters and ground glass. His shoulders and neck ached with a fierce tiredness. Mr. Gray was beating his body to death as he made his final charge, and there was nothing Jonesy could do about it. The Dreamcatcher was still okay, swaying back and forth in great looping arcs, but still okay. Jonesy fixed his eyes on it. He had thought himself ready to die, but he didn't want to go like this, not in this stinking office. Outside of it, they had once done something good, something almost noble. To die in here beneath the dusty, indifferent gaze of the woman pinned to the bulletin board, that didn't seem fair. Never mind the rest of the world. He, Gary Jones of Brookline, Massachusetts, once of Derry, Maine, lately of the Jefferson Tract, deserved better. "Please, I deserve better than this," he cried to the swaying cobweb shape in the air, and on the disintegrating desk behind him. The telephone rang. Jonesy wheeled around, groaning at the fiery, complicated pain in his hip. The phone on which he had called Henry earlier had been his office phone, the Brewtrim line. The one on the cracked surface of the desk was now black and clunky, with a dial instead of buttons and a sticker on it reading, "May the Force be with you." It was the phone he had had in his childhood room, the one his parents had given him for his birthday, 949-7784. The number to which he had charged the call to Duddits all those years ago. He sprang for it, ignoring his hip, praying the line wouldn't disintegrate and disconnect before he could answer. "Hello? Hello?" Swaying back and forth on the shaking, vibrating floor. The whole office was now going up and down like a ship on a heavy sea. Of all the voices he might have expected, Roberta's was the last. "Yes, doctor. Hold on for your call." There was a click so loud it hurt his head, then silence. Jonesy groaned and was about to put the phone down when there was another click. "Jonesy!" It was Henry, faint, but undoubtedly Henry. "Where are you?" Jonesy shouted. "Christ, Henry, this place is falling apart. I am falling apart." "I'm at Goslin's," Henry said. "Only I'm not. Wherever you are, you're not. You are in the hospital where they took you after you got hit." A crackle on the line, a buzz, and then Henry came back, sounding closer and stronger, sounding like a lifeline in all this disintegration. Not there either. "We are in the Dreamcatcher and we always were. Ever since 78. Duddits is the Dreamcatcher, but he's dying. He's holding on, but I don't know how long." Another click, followed by another buzz, bitter and electric. "Henry! Henry! Come out!" Faint again now. Henry sounded desperate. "You have to come out, Jonesy! Meet me! Run along the Dreamcatcher and meet me. There's still time. We can take this son of a bitch. Do you hear me? We can!" There was another click and the phone went dead. The body of his childhood phone cracked, split open, and vomited out of a senseless tangle of wires. All of them were red-orange. All of them were contaminated with the virus. Jonesy dropped the phone and looked at the swaying Dreamcatcher, that ephemeral cobweb. He remembered a line they'd been fond of as kids, pulled out some comedian's routine. "Wherever you are, there you are." That had been right up there with same shit, different day. Had perhaps even taken over first place as they grew older and began to consider themselves sophisticated. Wherever you are, there you are. Only according to Henry's call just now, that wasn't true. Wherever they thought they weren't. They were in the Dreamcatcher. He noted that the one swaying in the air above the ruins of his desk had 4 central spokes radiating out from the center. Many connecting threads were held together by those spokes. But what held the spokes together was the center, the core, where they merged. "Run along the Dreamcatcher and meet me. There's still time." Jonesy turned and sprinted for the door. Mr. Gray was also at the door, the one into the shaft house. It was locked. Considering what had happened with the Russian woman, this didn't surprise him much. Locking the barn door after the horse had been stolen was Jonesy's phrase for it. If he'd had one of the Kim, this would have been easy. As it was, he wasn't too perturbed. One of the interesting side effects of having emotions, he had discovered, was that they caused you to think ahead, plan ahead, so that you wouldn't trigger an all-out emotional attack if things went wrong. It might be one reason these creatures had survived as long as they had. Jonesy's suggestion that he give in to all this, go native, had been his phrase for it, one that struck Mr. Gray as both mysterious and exotic. Wouldn't quite leave his mind, but Mr. Gray pushed it aside. He would accomplish his mission here, satisfy the imperative. After that, who knew? Bacon sandwiches, perhaps. And what Jonesy's mind identified as a cocktail. This was a cool and refreshing drink, slightly intoxicating. A gust of wind rolled off the reservoir, slapping wet snow into his face, momentarily blinding him. It was like a snap of a wet towel, returning him to be here and now, where he had a job to finish. He sidled to the left on the rectangular granite stoop, slipped, then dropped to his knees, ignoring the howl from Jonesy's hip. He hadn't come all this way, black light years and white miles, either to fall back down to the steps and break his neck, or to tumble into the Quabbin and die of hypothermia in that chilly water. The stoop had been placed atop a mound of crushed stone. Leaning over to the left side of the stoop, he brushed the snow away and began feeling for the loose chunk. These were windows flanking the locked door, narrow but not too narrow. The sound was tamped down and flattened by the heavy fall of wet snow, but he could hear the snow of an approaching motor. There had been another as well, but that one had already stopped, probably at the end of the East Street. They were coming, but they were too late. It was a mile along the path, which was densely overgrown and slippery underfoot. By the time they got there, the dog would be down the shaft, drowning and delivering the Byram into the aqueduct at the same time. He found the loose rock and pulled it free, working carefully so as not to dislodge the pulsing body of the dog around his shoulders. He backed away from the edge of his knees, then tried to get to his feet. At first he couldn't. The ball of Jonesy's hip had swelled tight again. He finally lurched upright, although the pain was incredible, seeming to go all the way up to his teeth and his temples. He stood for a moment, holding Jonesy's bad right leg a little off the ground like a horse with his stone in his hoof, bracing himself like the locked shaft door house. When the pain had abated somewhat, he used the rock to beat the glass out of the window to the left of the door. He cut Jonesy's hand in several places, once deeply, and several cracked panes in the upper half of the window hung over the lower half like a cut-rate guillotine. But he paid no attention to these things, nor did he sense that Jonesy had finally left his bolt hole. Mr. Gray squirmed in through the window, landed on the cold concrete floor, and looked around. He was in a rectangular room about 30 feet long. At the far end, a window which no doubt would have been a spectacular view of the reservoir on a clear day showed only white, as if the sheet had been tacked over it. To one side of it, what had looked like a gigantic steel pail, its sides speckled with red, not virus, but an oxide Jonesy identified as rust. Mr. Gray didn't know for sure, but guessed that men would be lowered down the shaft in a bucket should some emergency require it. The iron cover, 4 feet across, was in place, seated dead center in the middle of the floor. He could see the square notch on one side of it and looked around. A few tools leaned against the wall. One of them, in a scatter of glass from the broken window, was a crowbar, quite possibly the same one the Russian woman was used. Quite possibly the same one the Russian woman used. Quite possibly the same one the Russian woman had used as she prepared for her suicide. The way I heard it, Mr. Gray thought, the folks in Boston will be drinking the last Byram in the morning coffee right around Valentine's Day. He seized the crowbar, limped painfully to the center of the room with his breath puffing cold and white before him, then seated the spatulate end of the tool in the slot of the cover. The fit was perfect. Henry racks the telephone, takes in a deep breath, holds it, and then runs for the door, which is marked both office and private. "Hey!" Old Rainey Gosselin squawks from her place at the cash register. "Come back here, kid! You can't go in there!" Henry doesn't stop, doesn't even slow. But he goes through the door. He realizes that, yeah, he's a kid. Lives a foot shy of his final height, and although he's wearing specs, they are nowhere as near as heavy as they will be later on. He's a kid, but under all that flopping hair, which will have thinned by the time he hit his 30s, there is an adult's brain. "I'm two minutes in one," he thinks, and he bursts into old man Gosselin's office. He's cackling madly, laughing like they did in the old days, when the strands of the Dreamcatcher were all close to the center and that it was running their pegs. "They used to say, I almost busted a gut. What a fucking pisser!" Into the office he goes, but it's not old man Gosselin's office, where a man named Owen Underhill once played a man whose name was not Abraham Kurtz, a tape of the Grey Boys talking in famous voices. It is a corridor, a hospital corridor, and Henry is not in the least surprised. It's Mass General. He's made it. The place is dank, colder than any hospital corridor should be, and the walls are splotched with virus. Somewhere a voice is groaning. "I don't want you. I don't want to get shot. I want Jonesy. Jonesy knew that it. Jonesy died in an ambulance. Jonesy the only one who will do. Stay away. Kiss my bender. I want Jonesy." And he will not stay away. He has business here. He walks unseen down the corridor, where there's cold enough for him to see the breath puffing out in front of him. A boy in an orange coat, he will soon outgrow. He wishes he had seen his rifle, the one Pete's dad loaned him, but that rifle is gone, left behind, buried in the years along with Jonesy's phone with the Star Wars sticker on it. How they all had envied that phone, and Beaver's jacket of many zippers and Pete's sweater with the NASA logo on the breast. Buried in the years. Some dreams die and fall free. That is another of the world's bitter truths. How many bitter truths there are. He walks past a pair of laughing, talking nurses. One of them is Josie Rickenhauer, all grown up, and the other is a woman in the Polaroid photograph they saw that day through the Tracker Brothers' office window. They don't see him because he's not here for them. He's in the Dreamcatcher now, running back along his strand, running toward the center. "I'm the Eggman," he thinks. Time slowed, reality bent, on and on the Eggman went. Henry went up the corridor, toward the sound of Mr. Gray's voice. Kurtz heard it clearly enough, through the shattered window, the broken stutter of automatic rifle. It provoked an old sense of unease and impatience in him. Anger that the shooting had started without him, and fear it would be over before he got there. Nothing left but the wounded yelling, "Medic! Medic! Medic!" "Push it harder, Freddy!" Directly in front of Kurtz, Perlmutter was snoring, ever deeper into his coma. "Pretty greasy underfoot, boss." "Push it anyway. I've got a feeling we're almost." He saw a pink stain on the white, clean curtain of the snow, as diffuse as blood from the facial cut, seeping through the shaving cream, and then the ditched Subaru was right in front of them, nose down and tail up. In the following moments, Kurtz took back every unkind thought he'd had about Freddy's driving. In second in command, simply twisted the steering wheel to the right and punched the gas when the Humvee started to skid. The big vehicle took hold and leaped at the break in the road. It hit with a tremendous jouncing crash. Kurtz flew upward, hitting the ceiling hard enough to produce a shower of stars in his field of vision. Perlmutter's arms flailed like those of a corpse. His head snapped backward and then forward. The Humvee passed close enough to the Subaru to tear the door handle off the car's passenger side. Then it was bucketing onward, now chasing a single pair of relatively fresh tire tracks. "Breathing down your neck now, Owen," Kurtz thought. "Right down your over-loving neck. God rot your blue eyes." The only thing that worried him was the single burst of fire. What was that about? Whatever it wasn't repeated. Then, up ahead, another of those blotches in the snow. This one was olive green. This one was the other Hummer. They were gone, probably gone, but... "Lock and load," Kurtz said to Freddy. His voice was just a trifle shrill. "It's time for someone to pay the piper." By the time Owen got to the place where East Street ended, or turned in the northeast meandering Fitzpatrick Road depending on your interpretation, he could hear Kurtz behind him, and guessed that Kurtz would probably hear him as well. The Humvees weren't as loud as Harleys, but they were a long way from quiet. Jonesy's footprints were entirely gone now, but Owen could see the path which led down from the road and along the shore of the reservoir. He killed the engine. "Henry, looks like we're walking from the..." Owen stopped. He had been concentrating too hard on his driving to look behind him or even check the rearview mirror. He was unprepared for what he saw now, unprepared and appalled. Henry and Duddits were wrapped in what Owen first believed was a terminal embrace, their stubbly cheeks pressed together, their eyes closed, their face and coats smeared with blood. He could see neither of them breathing and thought they had actually died together. Duddits of his leukemia, Henry perhaps of a heart attack, brought on by exhaustion and the constant, unrelieved stress of the last 30 hours or so. and then he saw the minute twitch of their eyelids, both set, embracing, splattered with blood, but not dead, sleeping, dreaming. Owen started to call Henry's name again, and then reconsidered. Henry had refused to leave the compound back in Jefferson Tract without freeing the detainees, and although they had gotten away with that once, it had only been through the sheerest luck or providence, if you believed that was any more than a TV show. They had gotten Kurtz on their tail. Kurtz was hung on like a booger, and now he was a lot closer than he would have been had Owen and Henry simply crept away into the storm. Well, I wouldn't change that, Owen thought, and opening the driver's door and getting out. From somewhere north, away in the white blank of the storm, came the scream of an eagle bitching about the weather. From behind south came the approaching racket of Kurtz, that annoying madman. It was impossible to tell how close because of the fucking snow. Coming down this fast and hard, it was like a sound baffle. It could have been 2 miles back. It could have been a lot closer. Freddy would be with him. Fucking Freddy, the perfect soldier. Dolph Lundgren from hell. Owen went around to the back of the car, slipping and sliding in the snow, cursing it, and popped the Humvee's back gate, expecting automatic weapons, hoping for a portable rocket launcher. No rocket launcher, no grenades either, but there were 4 MP5 auto-fire rifles and a carton containing long banana clips, the one that held 120 rounds. He had played it Henry's way back at the compound, and Owen guessed that they had saved at least some lives, but he would not play it Henry's way this time. If he hadn't paid enough for the Rapallo's goddamn serving platter, he would simply have to live with the debt. Not for long either, if Kurtz had his way. Henry was either sleeping, unconscious, or joining to his dying childhood friend in some weird mind melt. Let it be then. Awake and by his side, Henry might balk at what needed to be done, especially if Henry was right in believing the other friend was still alive, hiding out in the mind the alien now controlled. Owen would not bark, and with the telepathy gone, he wouldn't hear Jonesy pleading for his life. If he was still in there, the Glock was a good weapon, but not sure enough. The MP5 would rip the body of Gary Jones apart. Owen grabbed one, plus 3 extra clips, which he stuffed into his coat pockets. Kurtz, close now. Close, close, close. He looked back at E Street, almost expecting to see the other Humvee materializing like a green-brown ghost. But as yet there was nothing. Praise Jesus, as Kurtz would say. The Hummer's windows were already glazing over with snow, but he could see the dim shapes of the 2 men in the rear seat as he passed along with the body of the vehicle, trotting now, still locked in each other's arms. "Goodbye, boys," he said. "Sleep well." And with any luck, they would still be sleeping when Kurtz and Freddy arrived, putting an end to their lives before moving on after their main quarry. Owen stopped suddenly, skidding in the snow and grabbing the Humvee's long hood to keep from falling. Darrett's was clearly a lost cause, but he might be able to save Henry Devlin. It was just possible. No! A part of his mind screamed as he stared back for the rear door. No, there is no time! But Owen decided to gamble that there was, to gamble the whole world. Maybe to pay a little more on what he owed for the Rapallo's plate. Maybe for what he had done yesterday. Those naked grey figures standing around their down ship with their arms held up as if in surrender. Probably just for Henry, who had told him they would be heroes, who had tried splendidly to fulfill that promise. No sympathy for the devil, he thought, wrenching open the rear door. No, sir, zero sympathy for that motherfucker. Darrett's was closer. Owen seized him by the collar of his big blue duffel coat and yanked. Duddits toppled sideways onto the seat. His hat fell off, revealing his shining bald skull. Henry, with his arm still around Duddits' shoulders, came with him, landing on top. His eyes didn't open, but he groaned softly. Owen leaned forward and whispered fiercely into Henry's ear. "Don't sit up, for the love of God, Henry, don't you sit up." Owen withdrew, slammed the door, backed off 3 steps, placed the butt of the rifle against his hip and fired a burst. The Humvee's windows turned to milk, then fell in. Casings clinked around Owen's feet. He stepped forward again and looked through the shattered window into the rear seat. Henry and Duddits still lay there, now covered with crumbles of soft glass, as well as Duddits' blood. And to Owen, they looked like the 2 deadest people he had ever seen. Owen hoped Kurtz would be in too much of a hurry for a close examination. In any case, he had done the best he could. He heard the hard metallic jouncing sound and grinned. That placed Kurtz, by God. They'd reached the washout where the Subaru had finished up. He wished mightily that Kurtz and Freddy had rear-ended that fucking thing. But the sound had not, unfortunately, been that loud. Still, it placed them a mile back at least. Not as bad as he thought. "Plenty of time," he muttered. And that might be true of Kurtz, but what about the other end? Where was Mr. Gray now? Holding the MP5 by the strap, Owen started down the path that led to Shaft 12. Mr. Gray had discovered another unlovely human emotion: panic. He has come all this way, light years through space, miles through the snow, to be balked by Jonesy's muscles, which were weak and out of shape, and the iron shaft cover, which was much heavier than he had expected. He yanked down the crowbar until Jonesy's back muscles screamed in agonized protest, and was finally rewarded by a brief wink of darkness from beneath the edge of the rusty iron, and a grinding sound as it moved a bit, perhaps no more than an inch or 2 on the concrete. Then Jonesy's lower back muscles locked up, and Mr. Gray staggered away from the shaft, crying out through the clenched teeth. Thanks to his immunity, Jonesy still had a full set of them, and pressing his hand to the base of Jonesy's spine, as if to keep it from exploding. Lad let out a series of yipping whines. Mr. Gray looked at him and saw that things had now reached the critical juncture. Although he was still asleep, Lad's abdomen was now grotesquely swelled, that one of his legs stuck stiffly up in the air. The skin of his lower belly had stretched to a point of splitting, and the veins there pulsed with clock-like rapidity. A trickle of bright blood spilled out from beneath his tail. Mr. Gray looked balefully at the crowbar jutting from the slot in the iron cover. In Jonesy's imagination, the Russian woman had been a slim beauty with dark hair and dark, tragic eyes. In reality, Mr. Gray thought, she would have been a broad-shouldered and muscular. How else could she have? There was a blast of gunfire, alarmingly close. Mr. Gray gasped and looked around. Thanks to Jonesy, the human corrosion of doubt was also a part of his makeup now, and for the first time he realized that he might be balked. Yes, even here, so close to his goal that he could hear it. The sound of rushing water starting on its 60-mile underground journey. And all that stood between the Byram and his whole world was a circular iron plate weighing 120 pounds. Screaming a thin and desperate litany of beaver curses, Mr. Gray rushed forward, Jonesy's failing body jerking back and forth on the defective pivot point of his right hip. One of them was coming, the other called Owen, and Mr. Gray dared not believe he could make this Owen turn his weapon on himself. Given time, given the element of surprise, maybe, now he had neither. And this man who was coming had been trained to kill. It was his career. Mr. Gray leaped into the air. There was a snap, quite audible, as Jonesy's overstressed hip broke free from the swollen socket which had held it. Mr. Gray landed on the crowbar with Jonesy's full weight. The edge lifted again, and this time the cover slid almost a foot across the concrete. The black crescent through which the Russian woman had slipped appeared again. Not much of a crescent, really, no more than a delicate capital C drawn with a calligrapher's pen, but enough for the dog. Jonesy's leg would no longer support Jonesy's weight. And where was Jonesy anyway? Still not a murmur from his troublesome host. But that was all right. Crawling would do now. Mr. Gray worked his way in such fashion across the cold cement floor to where the sleeping border collie lay, seized Lad by his collar, and began to drag him back to shaft 12. The Hall of Memories, the vast repository of boxes, is now on the verge of shaking itself apart. The floor shudders as if in the grip of an endless, low earthquake. Overhead, the fluorescents flicker on and off, giving the place a stuttery, hallucinatory look. In places, tall stacks of cartons have fallen over, blocking some of the corridors. Jonesy runs as best as he can. He moves from corridor to corridor, threading his way through the maze purely on instinct. He tells himself repeatedly to ignore the goddamn hip. He's nothing but mine now anyway, but he might as well be an amputee trying to convince his missing limb to stop throbbing. He runs past boxes marked Austro-Hungarian War and departmental politics and children's stories and contents on upstairs closet. He hurdles a pile of tumbled boxes marked Carla, comes down on his bad leg and screams at the pain. He clutches more boxes, these marked Gettysburg, in order to keep them from falling. And at last, he sees the far side of the storage room. Thank God, it seems to him that he has run miles. The door is marked ICU and quite please, and no visitors without pass. And that is right. This is where they took him. This is where he had awakened and heard crafty old Mr. Death pretending to call for Marseille. Jonesy bangs through the door and into another world. One he recognizes, the blue over white ICU corridor, where he took his first painful, tentative steps 4 days after his surgery. He stumbles a dozen feet down the tiled corridor, sees the splotches of virus growing on the walls, hears the music, which is decidedly unhospital-like. Although it's turned low, it appears to be Rolling Stones singing Sympathy for the Devil. He has no more than identified this song when his hip suddenly goes nuclear. Jonesy utters a surprised scream and falls to the black and red ICU tiles, clutching at himself. This is how it was after he was hit, an explosion of red agony. He rolls over and over, looking up at the glowing light panels and the circular speakers from which the music, Anastasia screamed in vain, is coming. Music from another world. When the pain is this bad, everything is in another world. Pain makes a shadow of substance and mockery, even of love. That is something he learned in March and must learn again now. He rolls and he rolls, hands clutching at his swollen hip, eyes bulging, mouth pulled back in vast rictus, and he knows what has happened all right. Mr. Gray, that son of a bitch Mr. Gray, has re-broken his hip. Then, from far away, in that other world, he hears a voice he knows. A kid's voice. "Jonesy!" Echoing, distorted, but not that far away. Not this corridor, but one of the adjacent ones. Whose voice? One of his own kids? John, maybe? No. Jonesy, you have to hurry. He's coming to kill you. Owen is coming to kill you. He doesn't know who Owen is, but he knows who that voice belongs to. Henry Devlin. But not as it is now, or as it was when he saw Henry going off to Gosselin's market with Pete. This is the voice of Henry he grew up with. The one who told Richie Granado that they'd tell on him if he didn't stop. That Richie and his friends would never catch Pete because Pete ran like the fucking wind. I can't, he calls back, still rolling on the floor. He's aware that something has changed, is still changing, but not what. I can't. He broke my hip again. The son of a bitch broke. And then he realizes what is happening to him. The pain is running backward. It's like watching a videotape as it rewinds. The milk flows up from the glass to the carton. The flower which should be blooming through the miracle of time-lapse photography closes up instead. The reason is obvious when he looks down at himself and sees the bright orange jacket he is wearing. It's the one his mother bought him in Sears for his first hunting trip to Hole in the Wall. The trip where Henry got his deer and they all killed Richie Granado and his friends. Killed them with a dream. Maybe not meaning to, but doing it just the same. He has become a child again, a kid of 14, and there is no pain. Why would there be? His hip would not be broken for another 23 years, and then it all comes together with a crash in his mind. There was never any Mr. Gray. Not really. Mr. Gray lives in the Dreamcatcher and nowhere else. He is no more real than the pain in his hip. I was immune, he thinks, getting up. I never got so much as a speck of the virus. What's in my head isn't quite a memory, not that, but a true ghost in the machine. He is me. Dear God, Mr. Gray is me. Jonesy scrambles to his feet and begins to run, almost losing his feet as he swerves around the corner. He stays up though. He's agile and quick only as a 14-year-old can be, and there is no pain, no pain. The next corridor is the one he knows. There is a parked gurney with a bedpan on it. Walking past it, moving delicately on tiny feet, is the deer he saw that day in Cambridge, just before he was struck. There is a collar around his velvety neck, and swinging from it is an oversized amulet with his magic 8-ball. Jonesy sprints past the deer, which looks at him with mild, surprised eyes. Jonesy! Close now, very close. Jonesy, hurry! Jonesy redoubles his speed, feet flying, young lungs, breathing easily. There is no virus because he is immune. There is no Mr. Gray, not in him at least. Mr. Gray is in the hospital and always was. Mr. Gray is the phantom limb you still feel, the one you could swear is still there. Mr. Gray is the ghost in the machine, the ghost on life support, and the life support is him. He turns another corner. Here are 3 doors which are standing open. Beyond them, on the 4th door, the only one that is closed, Henry is standing. Henry is 14 as Jonesy is. Henry is wearing an orange coat as Jonesy is. His glasses have slid down his nose as they always did, and he is beckoning urgently. Hurry up, Jonesy. Duddits can't hold on much longer. If he dies before we kill Mr. Gray... Jonesy joins Henry at the door. He wants to throw his arm around him, embrace him, but there is no time. This is all my fault, he tells Henry, and his voice is higher in pitch than it had been in years. Not true, Henry said. He's looking at Jonesy with the old impatience that owed Jonesy and Pete and Beaver as children. Henry always seemed farther ahead, always on the verge of sprinting into the future and leaving the rest of them behind. They always seem to be holding him back. But you might as well say that Duddits murdered Richie Granado and that we were his accomplices. He was what he was, Jonesy, and he made us what we are, not on purpose. This was all he could do to tie his shoes on purpose. Don't you know that? And Jonesy thinks, fit wa? Fit Neek? Henry is Duddits. He's holding on for us, Jonesy. I told you, holding us together in the Dreamcatcher. That's right. So are we going to stand out here arguing in the hall while the world goes down the chute, or are we going to... We are going to kill this son of a bitch, Jonesy says, and reaches for the doorknob. Above it is a sign reading, "There is no infection here." And suddenly he sees both of the sign's bitter edges. It's like one of those Escher optical illusions. Look at it from one angle and it's true. Look at it from another and it's the most monstrous lie in the universe. Dreamcatcher, Jonesy thinks and turns the knob. The room beyond the door is a virus madhouse, a nightmare jungle overgrown with creepers and vines and lianas twisted together in blood-colored plates. The air reeks of sulfur and chilly ethyl alcohol. The smell of starter fluid sprayed into bulky carb on a sub-zero January morning. At least they don't have to. At least they don't have the shit weasel to worry about. Not in here. That's on the other strand of the Dreamcatcher. In another place and time. The Byram is Lad's problem now. He's a border collie with a very dim future. The television is on, and although the screen is overgrown with virus, a ghostly black and white image comes straining through. A man is dragging the corpse of a dog across a concrete floor. Dusty and strewn with dead autumn leaves, it's like a tomb in one of the 50s horror flicks Jonesy still likes to watch on his VCR. But this isn't a tomb. It is filled with the hollow sound of rushing water. In the center of the floor, there is a rusty circular cover with MWRA stamped on it, Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. Even through the reddish scrum on the TV screen, these letters stand out. Of course they do. To Mr. Gray, who died as a physical being all the way back at Hole in the Wall, they mean everything. They mean quite literally the world. The shaft lid has been partly pushed aside, revealing a crescent shape of absolute darkness. The man dragging the dog is himself, Jonesy realizes, and the dog isn't quite dead. It is leaving a trail of frothy pink blood behind on the concrete, and its back legs are twitching, almost paddling. "Never mind the movie," Henry almost snarls, and Jonesy turns his attention to the figure in the bed. The grey thing with the virus speckled sheet pulled up to its chest, which is a plain grey expanse of poreless, hairless, nippleless flesh. Although he can't see now because of the sheet, Jonesy knows there is no navel either because this thing was never born. It is a child's rendering of an alien, trolled directly from the subconscious minds of those who first came in contact with the Byram. They never existed as actual creatures, aliens, ETs. The Greys as physical beings were always created out of human imagination, out of the Dreamcatcher. And knowing this affords Jonesy a measure of relief. He wasn't the only one who got fooled. At least there is that. Something else pleases him. The look in those horrid black eyes. It's fear. "I'm locked and loaded," Freddy said quietly, drawing to a stop behind the Humvee they had chased all these miles. "Outstanding," Kurt said. "Recon that HMV, I'll cover you." "Right." Freddy looked at Perlmutter, whose belly was swelling again, then at Owen's Hummer. The reason for the rifle fire they had heard earlier was clear now. The Hummer had been shot up pretty good.
The only question left to be answered was who had been on the giving end and who was on the receiving. Tracks led away from the Hummer, growing indistinct under the rapid snowfall, but for now clear enough to read. A single set. Boots. Probably Owen. "Go on now, Freddy." Freddy got out into the snow. Kurtz slid out behind him and Freddy heard him rack the slide of his personal, depending on the 9mm. Well, maybe that was alright, he was good with it, no question of that. Freddy felt a momentary coldness down his spine, as if Kurtz had the 9 leveled there, right there. That was ridiculous, wasn't it? Owen, yes, but Owen was different. Owen had crossed the line. Freddy hurried to the Hummer, bent low, carbine held at the chest level. He didn't like having Kurtz behind him. That was undeniable. No, he didn't like that at all. As the two boys advanced to the overgrown bed, Mr. Gray begins to push the call button repeatedly, but nothing happens.
"I think the works must be choked with virus," Jonesy thinks. "Too bad, Mr. Gray, too bad for you."
He glances up at the TV and sees that his film self has gotten the dog to the edge of the shaft. Maybe they are too late after all. Maybe not. There's no way to tell. The wheel is still spinning.
"Hello, Mr. Gray. I've so much wanted to meet you,"
Henry says. As he speaks, he removes the virus-splotched pillow from beneath Mr. Gray's narrow, airless head. Mr. Gray tries to wriggle toward the other side of the bed, but Jonesy holds him in place, grasping the alien's child-thin arms. The skin in his hands is neither hot or cold. Doesn't feel like skin at all. Not really. It feels like nothing, he thinks. Like a dream. "Mr. Gray," Henry asks, "this is how we say, 'Welcome to planet Earth.'" And he pulls the pillow over Mr. Gray's face. Beneath Jonesy's hands, Mr. Gray begins to struggle and trash. Somewhere a monitor begins to beep frantically, as if this creature actually has a heart, and that it has now stopped beating. Jonesy looks down at the dying monster and wishes only for this to be over. Mr. Gray got the dog to the side of the shaft. He had partially uncovered. Coming up through the narrow black semicircle was the steady hollow rush of running water and a waft of dank, cold air. If it were done when 'tis done, then it were done quickly. That from the box marked Shakespeare. The dog's rear legs were bicycling rapidly. Mr. Gray could hear the wet sound of tearing flesh as the Byram thrust with one end and chewed with the other, forcing itself out. Beneath the dog's tail, the chittering had started, a sound like an angry monkey. He had to get it into the shaft before it could emerge. It did not absolutely have to be born in the water, but its odds of survival would be much higher than it was. Mr. Gray tried to shove the dog's head into the gap between the cover and the concrete and couldn't get it through. The neck bent and the dog's senselessly grinning snout twisted upward. Although still sleeping, or perhaps it was now unconscious, it began to utter a series of low, choked barks. And it wouldn't go through the gap.
"Fuck me, Freddy!"
Mr. Gray screamed. He was barely aware of the snarling ache in Jonesy's hip now. Certainly not aware that Jonesy's face was strained and pale, the hazel eyes wet with tears of effort and frustration. He was aware, terribly aware, that something was going on. Going on behind my back, Jonesy would have said. And who else could it be? Who else but Jonesy, his reluctant host?
"Fuck you!"
he screamed at the damned, hateful, stubborn, just a little too big dog.
"You are going down, do you hear me? Do you?"
The words stopped in his throat. All at once he couldn't yell anymore, although he dearly wanted to. How he loved to yell and pound his fists on things, even a dying pregnant dog. All at once he couldn't breathe, yet alone yell. What was Jonesy doing to him? He expected no answer, but one came, a stranger's voice, full of cold rage. "This is how we say welcome to planet Earth." The flailing, three-fingered hands of the grey thing in the hospital bed come up and actually push the pillow aside for a moment. The black eyes, starting from the otherwise featureless face, are frantic with fear and rage. It gasps for breath. Considering that it doesn't really exist at all, not even in Jonesy's brain at least, as a physical artifact, it is fighting furiously for its life. Henry cannot sympathize, but he understands. It wants what Jonesy wants, what Daditz wants, what even Henry himself wants. For in spite of all his black thoughts, has his heart not gone on beating? Has his liver not gone on washing his blood? Has his body not gone on fighting its unseen wars against everything from common cold to cancer to the virus itself? The body is either stupid or infinitely wise. But in either case, it is spared the terrible witchery of thought. It only knows how to stand its ground and fight until it can fight no more. If Mr. Grey was any different, he is different no longer. He wants to live. "But I don't think you will," Henry says in a voice that is calm, almost soothing. "I don't think so, my friend," and once more puts the pillow over Mr. Grey's face. Mr. Grey's airway opened. He got one breath of the cold shaft house air, two, and then the airway closed up again. They were smothering him, stifling him, killing him. "No! Kiss my bender! Kiss my fucking bender! You can't do this!" He yanked the dog bag and turned it sideways. It was almost like watching a man already late for his plane trying to make one last bulky article fit into his suitcase. "It will go through this way," he thought. Yes, it would, even if he had to collapse the dog's bulging middle with Jonesy's hands and allow the Byram to squirt free. One way or the other, the damn thing would go through. Face swelling, eyes bulging, breath stopped, a single fat vein swelling in the middle of Jonesy's forehead. Mr. Grey shoved Lad deeper into the crack and then began to thump the dog's chest with Jonesy's fists. "Go through, damn you! Go through! Go through!" Freddie Johnson pointed his carbine inside the abandoned Hummer, while Kurtz, stationed shrewdly behind him, in a way it was like the attack on the Grey Boy ship all over again, waited to see what would develop. "Two guys, boss. Looks like Owen decided to put out the trash before moving on." "Dead?" "They look pretty dead to me. Got to be Devlin and the other one. The one they stopped for." Kurtz joined Freddie, took a brief glance in through the shattered window, and nodded. They looked pretty dead to him too, a pair of white moles lying entwined in the back seat covered with blood and shattered glass. He raised his 9mm to make sure of them. One each in the head couldn't hurt, then lowered it again. Owen might have not heard their engine. The snow was amazingly heavy and wet, an acoustical blanket, that was very possible. But he would hear gunshots. He turned toward the path instead. "Lead the way, Buck, and mind the footing. Looks slippery. And maybe still have the element of surprise. I think we should bear in mind, don't you?" Freddie nodded. Kurt smiled. It turned his face into a skull's face. "With any luck, Buck, Owen Underhill will be in hell before he even knows he's dead." The TV remote, a rectangle of black plastic covered with virus, is lying on Mr. Grey's bed table. Jonesy grabs it. In a voice that sounds eerily like Beaver's, he says, "Fuck this shit!" and slams it down as hard as he can on the table's edge. Like a man cracking a shell of a hard-boiled egg, the controller shatters, spilling its batteries and leaving a jagged plastic wand in Jonesy's hand. He reaches below the pillow Henry is holding over the thrashing thing's face. He hesitates for a moment, remembering his first meeting with Mr. Gray, his only meeting. The bathroom knob coming free in his hand as the rod snapped. The sense of darkness which was the creature's shadow falling over him. It had been real enough then, real as roses, real as raindrops. Jonesy had turned and seen him. It, whatever Mr. Gray, had been before he was Mr. Gray, standing there in the big central room, a stuff of 100 movies and unexplained mysteries documentaries, only old and sick, ready even then for this hospital bed in the intensive care unit. "Ma say," it had said, plucking the word straight out of Jonesy's brain, pulling it like a cork, making a hole through which it could enter. Then it had exploded like a noisemaker on New Year's Eve, spraying virus instead of confetti, and I imagined the rest. That was it, wasn't it? Just another case of intergalactic schizophrenia. Basically, that was it. "Jonesy!" Henry shouts. "If you're gonna do it, then do it!" Here it comes, Mr. Gray, Jonesy thinks. Get ready for it, because payback's. Mr. Gray had gotten Lad's body halfway into the gap when Jonesy's voice filled his head. "Here it comes, Mr. Gray. Get ready for it, because payback's a bitch." There was a ripping pain across the middle of Jonesy's throat. Mr. Gray raised Jonesy's hands, making a series of gagging grunts that wouldn't quite attain the status of screams. He didn't feel the beard-stubbled, unbroken skin of Jonesy's throat, but his own ragged flesh. What he felt most strongly was shocked disbelief. It was the last of Jonesy's emotions upon which he drew. This could not be happening. They always came in the ships of the old ones, those artifacts. They always raised their hands in surrender. They always won. This could not be happening. Yet somehow it was. The Byram's consciousness did not so much fade as disintegrate. Dying, the entity once known as Mr. Gray reverted to its former state, as he became it, just before it could become nothing. Mr. Gray gave the dog's body a final vicious shove. It sank into the gap, yet still not quite far enough to go through. The Byram's last Jonesy-tinged thought was, "I should have taken him up on it. I should have gone Nate." Jonesy slashes the jagged edge of the TV controller across Mr. Gray's naked, wattled neck. Its throat peels open like a mouth, and the cloud of reddish-orange matter puffs out, staining the air the color of blood before falling back to the counterpane in the shower of dust and fluff. Mr. Gray's body twitches once, galvanically beneath Jonesy and Henry's hands, then shrivels like a dream it always wears and becomes something familiar. For a moment Jonesy can't make the connection, and then it comes. Mr. Gray's remains look like one of the condoms they saw on the floor of deserted office in the Tracker Brothers depot. "He's dead," is how Jonesy means to finish, but then a terrible bolt of pain tears through him. Not his hip this time, but his head and his throat. All at once, his throat is wearing a necklace of fire, and the whole room is transparent. Damned if it isn't. He's looking through the wall into the shaft house, where the dog stuck in the crack is giving birth to a wild red creature that looks like a weasel crossed with a huge blood-soaked worm. He knows well enough what it is, one of the Byram. Streaked with blood and shit and the remains of its own membranous placenta, its brainless black eyes staring, They are his eyes, Jonesy thinks, Mr. Gray's eyes. It has been born in front of him, stretching its body out, trying to pull free, wanting to drop into the darkness and fall toward the sound of running water. Jonesy looks at Henry. Henry looks back. Just for a moment, their young and startled eyes meet, and then they are disappearing as well. "Duddits," Henry says. His voice comes from far away. "Duddits is going, Jonesy." "Goodbye." Perhaps Henry means to say goodbye. Before they can, they are both gone. There was a moment of vertigo when Jonesy was exactly nowhere, a sense of utter disconnection. He thought it must be death, that he had killed himself as well as Mr. Gray, cut his own throat, as the saying went. What brought him back was pain, not in his throat that was gone and he could breathe again. He could hear the air going in and out of him in great dry gasps. No, this pain was an old acquaintance. It was his hip. It caught him and swung him back into the world around its swollen, howling axis, winding him up like a tetherball on a post. There was concrete under his knees. His eyes were full of fur, and he heard an inhuman chittering sound. "At least this part is real," he thought. "This part is outside the Dreamcatcher." That god-awful chittering sound. Jonesy saw the weasel now, dangling into the dark, held to the upper world only by its tail, which wasn't yet free of the dog. Jonesy lunged forward and clamped his hands around its slippery, shivering middle just as it pulled free. He rocked backward, his bad hip throbbing, holding the writhing, yimmering thing above his head like a carny performer with a boa constrictor. It whipped back and forth, teeth gnashing at the air, bending back on itself, trying to get at Jonesy's wrist and snagging the right sleeve of his parka instead, tearing it open and releasing a near weightless tangles of white down filling. Jonesy pivoted on his howling hip and saw a man framed in the broken window through which Mr. Gray had wriggled. The newcomer, his face long with surprise, was dressed in a camouflage parka and holding a rifle. Jonesy flung the wriggling weasel as hard as he could, which wasn't very hard. It flew perhaps 10 feet, landed on the leaf-littered floor with a wet thump, and immediately began slithering back toward the shaft. The dog's body plugged part of it, but not enough. There was plenty of room. "Shoot it!" Jonesy screamed at the man with the rifle. "For God's sake, shoot it before it can get into the water!" But the man in the window did nothing. The world's last hope only stood there, with his mouth hanging open. Owen simply couldn't believe what he was seeing. Some sort of red thing, a freakish weasel with no legs. To hear about such things was one matter, to actually see one was another. It squirmed towards the hole in the middle of the floor. The dog, with its stiffening paws held up as if in surrender, was wedged there. The man, it had to be Typhoid Jonesy, was screaming at him to shoot the thing, but Owen's arms simply couldn't come up. They seemed to be coated in lead. The thing was going to get away after all that happened. What he had hoped to prevent was going to happen right in front of him. It was like being in hell. He watched it wriggle forward, making a god-awful monkey sound that he seemed to hear in the center of his head. He watched Jonesy lunging with desperate awkwardness, hoping to catch it or at least head it off. It wasn't going to work. The dog was in the way. Owen again commanded his arms to raise the gun and point it, but nothing happened. The MP5 might as well been in another universe. He was going to let it get away. He was going to stand there like a post and let it get away. God help him. God help them all. Henry sat up in the back seat of the Humvee, dazed. There was stuff in his hair. He brushed at it, still feeling caught in the dream of the hospital. Except that was no dream, he thought. and then a sharp prick of pain restored him to something like reality. It was glass. His hair filled with glass, more of it. Soft tea glass, crumbles of it, covered the seat and Duddits. Useless, of course. Duddits was dead. Must be dead. He had expended the last of his failing energy to bring Jonesy and Henry together in that hospital room. But Duddits groaned. His eyes opened, and looking into them brought Henry all the way back to his snowy dead-end road. Duddits' eyes were red and bloody zeros, the eyes of a sibyl.
"Ooby!"
Duddits cried. His eyes rose and made a weak aiming gesture, as if held a rifle.
"Ooby-doo! Awesome work to you now!"
From somewhere up ahead in the woods, 2 rifle shots came in answer. A pause, then a third one. "Dud!" Henry whispered. "Duddits!" Duddits saw him, even through his bloody eyes. Duddits saw him. Henry more than felt this for a moment. He actually saw himself through Duddits' eyes. It was like looking into a magic mirror. He saw the Henry who had been, a kid looking out at the world through horn-rimmed glasses that were too big for his face and always sliding down to the end of his nose. He felt Duddits' love for him, a simple and uncomplicated emotion, untinctured by doubt or selfishness or even gratitude. Henry took Duddits in his arms, and when he felt the lightness of his old friend's body, Henry began to cry. "You were the lucky one, buddy," he said, and wished Beaver were here. Beaver could have done what Henry could not. Beaver could have sung Duddits to sleep. "You were always the lucky one, that's what I think."
"Annie?"
Duddits said and touched Henry's cheek. With one hand, he was smiling, and his final words were perfectly clear.
"I love you, Annie."
2 shots rang up ahead, carbine whip cracks. Not far up ahead either. Kurt stopped. Freddy was about 20 feet ahead of him. Standing by the sign Kurtz could just make out. Absolutely no fishing from Shaft House. A third shot, then silence.
"Boss,"
Freddy murmured. "Some kind of building up ahead." "Can you see anyone?" Freddy shook his head. Kurtz joined him, amused even at this point at the slight jump Freddy gave when Kurtz put his hand on Freddy's shoulder. And then he was right to jump. If Abe Kurtz survived the next 15 or 20 minutes, he intended to go forward alone into whatever brave new world there might be. No one to slow him down, no witnesses to his final guerrilla action. And while he might suspect, Freddy couldn't know for sure. Too bad that telepathy was gone. Too bad for Freddy. "Sounds like Owen found someone else to kill." Kurt spoke low into Freddy's ear, but still sported a few curls of Ripley, now white and dead.
"Do we get him?"
"Goodness, no," Kurtz replied. "Perish the thought. I believe the time has come regrettably. It comes in almost every life. But we must step off the path, Buck. Mingle with the trees. See who stays and who comes back. If anyone does, we'll give it 10 minutes, shall we? I think 10 minutes should be more than enough." The words which filled Owen Underhill's mind were now nonsensical but unmistakable. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, got some work to do now. The carbine came up. He wasn't the one who did it, but the force lifting the rifle left him. Owen was able to take over smoothly. He flicked the auto-selector switch to single-shot fire, sighted and squeezed the trigger twice. The first round missed, hitting the concrete in front of the weasel and ricocheting. The chips of concrete flew. The thing pulled back, turned, saw him, and bared its mouthful of needle teeth. "That's right, beautiful," Owen said. "Smile for the camera." His second shot went right through the weasel's humorless grin. It tumbled backward, struck the wall of the shaft house, and then fell on the concrete. Yet even with its rudiment of the head blown off, its instincts remained. It began to crawl slowly forward again. Owen aimed, and then as he centered the sight, he thought of the Rapelows, Dick and Irene. Nice people, good neighbors. If you needed a cup of sugar or a pint of milk, or a shoulder to cry on for that matter, you could always go next door and get fixed up. They said it was a stroke. Mr. Rapelo had called. Only Owen had thought he was saying stroke. Kids got everything wrong. This is for the Rapelos, and for the kid who kept getting it wrong. Owen fired a third time. This slug caught the Byram amidships and tore it in two. The ragged pieces twitched, lay still. With that done, Owen swung his carbine in a short arc. This time he settled the sight on the middle of Gary Jones's forehead. Jonesy looked unblinkingly back at him. Owen was tired, almost to death, and that's what it felt like. But this guy looked far past even that point. Jonesy raised his empty hands. "You have no reason to believe this," he said. "When Mr. Gray is dead, I cut his throat while Henry held a pillow over his face. It was right out of The Godfather." "Really?" Owen said, and there was no inflection in his voice whatsoever. "And where exactly did you perform this execution?" "In a Massachusetts General Hospital of the Mind," Jonesy said, and then he uttered the most joyless laugh Owen had ever heard in his life. "One where the deer roams the halls, and the only TV program is an old movie called Sympathy for the Devil." Owen jerked a little at that. "Shoot me if you have to, soldier. I have saved the world, with a little ninth inning relief help from you. I freely admit, you might as well pay me for the service in the traditional manner. Also, the bastard broke my hip again. A little going away present from the little man who wasn't there. The pain is..." Jonesy bared his teeth. "It's very large." Owen held the gun where it was a moment longer, then lowered it. "You can live with it," he said. Jonesy fell backward on the points of his elbows, groaned, turned his weight as well as he could on his unhurt side. "Duddits is dead. He was worth both of us put together more. And he is dead." He covered his eyes for a moment, then dropped his arm. "Man, what a fuckero this is. That's what Beaver would have called it. A total fuckero. This is opposed to a fuckery, you understand, which in Beaverese means a particularly fine time. Possibly, but not so necessarily of a sexual nature." Owen had no idea what the man was talking about. Likely he was delirious. "Duddits may be dead, but Henry's not. There are some people after us, Jonesy. Bad people. Do you hear them? Know where they are?" Lying on the cold, leaf-littered floor, Jonesy shook his head. "I'm back to my standard 5 senses, I'm afraid. ESP's all gone. The Greeks may come bearing gifts, but they are Indian givers." He laughed. "Jesus, I could lose my jaw for a crack like that. Sure you don't want to just shoot me?" Owen paid no more attention to this than he had to the semantical differences between fuckero and fuckery. Kurtz was coming. That was the problem he had to deal with now. He hadn't heard him arrive, but he might have not done. The snow was falling heavily, enough to damp all but loud sounds. Gunshots, for instance. "I had to go back to the road," he said. "You hang in there." "What choice?" Jonesy asked and closed his eyes. "Man, I wish I could go back to my nice warm coffee. I never thought I'd say that, but there it is." Owen turned and went back down the steps, slipping and sliding but managing to keep his feet. He scanned the woods to either side of the path, but not closely. If Kurtz and Freddy were laid up, waiting someplace between here and the Hummer, he doubted he would see them in time to do anything. He might see the tracks, But by then, he'd be so close to them, they'd likely be the last things he saw. He had to hope he was still ahead. That was all. He had to trust to plain old bald-ass luck. And why not? He'd been in plenty of tight places, and bald-ass luck has always pulled him through. Maybe it would do so edge. The first bullet took him in the belly, knocking him backward and blowing the back of his coat in a bell shape. He pumped his feet, trying to stay upright, also trying to hang on to the MP5. There was no pain, just a feeling of having been sucker punched by a large boxing glove on the fist of the main opponent. The second round shaved the side of his head, producing a burn and sting like rubbing alcohol poured on an open wound. The third shot hit him high, up on the right side of the chest, and that was kid he barred the door. He lost both his feet and the carbine. What had Jonesy said? Something about having saved the world and getting paid off in a traditional manner. And this wasn't so bad, really. It had taken Jesus 6 hours. They'd put a joke sign over his head, and come cocktail hour, they'd given him a stiff vinegar and water. He lay half on and half off the snow-covered path, vaguely aware that something was screaming, and it wasn't him. It sounded like an enormous pissed-off blue jay. That's an eagle, Owen thought. He managed to get a breath, and although the exhale was more blood than air, he was able to get up on his elbows. He saw 2 figures emerge from the tangle of birches and pines, bent low, very much in combat advance mode. One was squat and broad-shouldered, the other slim and grey-haired and positively perky. Johnson and Kurtz, the bulldog and the greyhound. His luck has run out after all. In the end, luck always did. Kurtz knelt beside him, eyes sparkling. In one hand he held a triangle of newspaper. It was battered and slightly curved from its long trip in Kurtz's rear pocket, but still recognizable. It was a cocked hat, a fool's hat. "Tough luck, Buck," Kurtz said. Owen nodded. It was very tough luck. "I see you found time to make me a little something." "I did. Did you achieve your prime objective at least?" Kurtz lifted his chin in the direction of the shaft house. Got him," Owen managed. His mouth was full of blood. He spat it out, tried to pull in another breath, and heard the good part of it wheeze out of some new hole instead. "Well then," Kurtz said benevolently. "All's well that ends well, wouldn't you say?" He put the newspaper hat tenderly on Owen's head. Blood soaked it immediately, spreading upward, turning the UFO story red. There was another scream from somewhere over the reservoir, perhaps from one of the islands that were actually hills poking up from a purposely drowned landscape. "That's an eagle," Kurtz said, and patted Owen's shoulder. "Count yourself lucky, laddie. God sent you a warbird to sing you to." Kurtz's head exploded in a spray of blood and brains and bone. Owen saw one final expression in the man's blue, white-lashed eyes, amazed disbelief. For a moment, Kurtz remained on his knees, then toppled forward on what remained of his face. Behind him, Freddie Johnson stood with his carbine, still raised and smoke drifting from the muzzle. "Freddie," Owen tried to say. No sound came out, but Freddie must have read his lips. He nodded. "Didn't want her to, but the bastard was going to do it to me. Didn't have to read his mind to know that. Not after all these years." "Finish it," Owen tried to say. Freddie nodded again. Perhaps there was a vestige of that goddamn telepathy left inside Freddie after all. Owen was fading, tired and fading. Good night, sweet laddies. Good night, David. Good night, Shay. Good night, sweet prince. He lay back on the snow, and it was like falling back into the bed, stuffed with the softest down. From somewhere faint and far, he heard the eagles scream again. They had invaded its territory, disturbed its snowy autumn peace, but soon they would be gone. The eagle would have the reservoir to itself again. We were heroes, Owen thought. Damned if we weren't. Fuck your hat, Kurtz. We were... He never heard the final shot. There had been more firing, and now there was silence. Henry sat in the back seat of the Humvee beside his dead friend, trying to decide what to do next. The chances that they had all killed each other seemed slim. The chances that the good guys, the good guy, had taken out the bad ones seemed slimmer still. His first impulse following his conclusion was to vacate the Hummer post-haste and hide in the woods. Then he looked at the snow. If I ever see snow again, he thought, it'll be too soon, and rejected the idea. If Kurtz or whoever was with him came back in the next half hour, Henry's tracks would still be there. They would follow his trail, and at the end of it, they'd shoot him like a rabid dog or a weasel. Get a gun then. Shoot them before they can shoot you. A better idea. He was no Wyatt Earp, but he could shoot straight. Shooting men was a lot different from shooting deer. You didn't have to be a head shrinker to know that. But he believed, given a clear line of fire, he could shoot these guys with very little hesitation. He was reaching for the door handle when he heard a surprise curse, a thump, yet another gunshot. This one was very close. Henry thought someone has lost his footing and gone down in the snow, discharging his weapon when he landed on his ass. Perhaps the son of a bitch had just shot himself. Was that too much to hope for? Wouldn't that just... But no joy. Henry heard a low grunt as a person who had fallen gotten up and came on again. There was only one option, and Henry took it. He lay back down on the seat, put Duddit's arms around him again as best he could, and played dead. He didn't think there was much chance this hugger-mugger would work. The bad guys had passed on their way in, obviously as he was still alive, but on their way in, they must have been in a pants-ripping hurry. Now they would be a lot less likely to be fooled by a few bullet holes, some broken glass, and the blood of old Duddit's final hemorrhages. Henry heard soft crunching footsteps in the snow, only one set by the sound, probably the infamous Kurtz, last man standing, darkness approaching, death in the afternoon, no longer his friend. Now he was only playing dead, but approaching just the same. Henry closed his eyes, waited. Footsteps passed the Humvee without slowing. Freddie Johnson's strategic goal was, for the time being, both extremely practical and extremely short-term. He wanted to get the goddamn Hummer turned around without getting stuck. If he managed that, he wanted to get past the break in E Street where the Subaru Owen had been chasing had come to grief, without getting ditched himself. If he had made it back to the access road, he might widen his horizons a trifle. The idea of Moss Pike surfaced briefly in his mind as he swung open the door of Boss's Hummer and slid behind the wheel. There was a lot of Western America down in I-19, a lot of places to hide. The stench of stale farts and chilly ethyl alcohol struck him like a slap as he swung the door closed. Pearly, goddamn Pearly. In the excitement, he had forgotten all about that little motherfucker. Freddie turned, raising the carbine, but Pearly was still out cold. No need to use another bullet. He could just step Perlmutter out into the snow. But if he was lucky, Pearly could freeze to death without ever waking up. Him and his little sidekick. Pearly wasn't sleeping though, nor out cold, nor in coma, not even that. Pearly was dead, and he was shrunken somehow, almost mummified. His cheeks were drawn in, hollow, wrinkled, The sockets of his eyes were deep divots, as if behind the thin veils of his closed lids, the eyeballs had fallen into what was now a hollow bucket. And he was tilted strangely against the passenger door, one leg raised, almost crossed over the other. It was as if he had died trying to perform the ever-popular one-cheek sneak. His fatigue pants were now dark, the muted colors turned to mud, and the seat under him was wet. The fingers of the stain spreading toward Freddy were red.
What the fuck?
From the back seat there arose a ear-splitting yammering. It was like listening to a powerful stereo turned rapidly up to full volume. Freddy caught movement from the corner of his right eye. A creature, beyond relief, appeared in the rearview mirror. It tore off Freddy's ear, then struck to his cheek, punched through his mouth, and latched onto his jaw in the inner gum line. And then Archie Perlmutter's shit weasel tore off the side of Freddy's face as a hungry man might tear a drumstick off a chicken. Freddy shrieked and discharged his weapon into the passenger door of the Hummer. He got an arm up and tried to shove the thing off. His fingers slipped on a slick newborn skin. The weasel withdrew, tossed his head back, and swallowed what it had torn off like a parrot with a piece of raw steak. Freddy flailed for the driver's seat door handle and found it, but before he could yank it up, the thing struck again, this time burying his mouth in the muscular flesh where Freddy's neck and shoulder merged. There was a vast jet of blood as his jugular opened. It spurted up to the Humvee's roof, then began to drip back like red rain. Freddy's feet jittered, bopping the Humvee's wide brake in a rapid tap dance. The creature in the backseat drew back again, seemed to consider, then slithered snake-like over Freddy's shoulder. It dropped on his lap. Freddy screamed once as the weasel tore off his plumbing, and then he screamed no more. Henry had twisted around in the back seat of the other Humvee, watching as the figure in the vehicle parked behind him jerked back and forth behind the wheel. Henry was glad of the thickly falling snow, equally glad of the blood that sprayed up, striking the windshield of the other Humvee, partially obscuring the view. He could see all too well as it was. At last the figure behind the wheel stopped moving and fell sideways. A bulky shadow rose over it, seeming to hulk in triumph. Henry knew what it was. He had seen one on Jonesy's bed, back in hole in the wall. One thing he could see was that there was a broken window in the Humvee, which had been chasing them. He doubted if the thing had much in the way of intelligence, but how much would it need to register fresh air? They don't like the cold. It kills them. Yes, indeed it did. But Henry had no intention of leaving it at that. Not just because the reservoir was so close, he could hear the water lapping on the rocks. Something had run up an extremely high debt, and only he was left to present the bill. Payback's a bitch, as Jonesy had so often observed, and payback time had arrived. He leaned over the seat. No weapons there. He leaned over further and thumbed down the glove compartment. Nothing in there but a litter of invoices, gasoline receipts, and a tattered paperback titled How to Be Your Own Best Friend. Henry opened the door, got out in the snow, and his feet immediately flew out from under him. He went on his butt with a thump and scrapped his back on the Hummer's high splashboard. Fuck me, Freddy. He got up, slipped again, grabbed the top of the open door, and managed to stay afoot this time. He shuffled his feet around to the back of the vehicle he had come in, never taking his eyes from his twin parked behind. He could still see the thing inside, thrashing and shuffling, dining on the driver. "Stay where you are, beautiful," Henry said, and began to laugh. The laughter sounded crazy as hell, but that didn't stop him. "Lay a few eggs. I'm the Eggman after all. Your friendly neighborhood Eggman. And how about a copy of How to Be Your Own Best Friend? I've got one." laughing so hard now he could barely speak, sliding in the wet and treacherous snow like a kid let out of school on his way to the nearest sledding hill, holding on to the flank of the Hummer as best as he could, except there was really nothing to hold on to once you were south of the doors, watching the thing shift and move, and then he couldn't see it anymore. Uh-oh, where the hell had it gotten to? In one of Jonesy's dopey movies, this is where the scary music would start, Henry thought. Attack of the killer shit weasels. That got him laughing again. He was around to the back of the vehicle now. There was a button you could push to unlatch the rear window, unless of course it was locked. Probably wasn't though. Hadn't Owen gotten to the back this way? Henry couldn't remember. Couldn't for the life of him. He was clearly not being his own best friend. Still cackling, fresh tears gushing out of his eyes, he thumped the button and the back window popped open. Henry yanked it wider and looked in. Guns! Thank God! Army carbines, like the kind that Owen had taken on his last patrol. Henry grabbed one and examined it. Safety, check. Fire selection switch, check. Clipped marked US Army, 5.56 caliber 120 rounds, check. So simple even a Byram can do it, Henry said and laughed some more. He bent over, holding his stomach and slipping around in the slop, trying not to fall again. His legs ached, his back ached, his heart ached most of all, and still he laughed. He was the Eggman, he was the laughing hyena. He walked around to the driver's side of Kurt's Humvee, guns raised, safety in, what he devoutly hoped was the off position. Spooky music playing in his head, but still laughing. There was the gasoline hatch, no mistaking that. But where was Gamera, the terror from beyond space? As if it had heard his thought, and Henry realized that was perfectly likely, the weasel smashed headfirst against the rear window, the one that was thankfully unbroken. His head was smeared with blood, hair and bits of flesh. Its dreadful sea-grape eyes stared into Henry's. Did it know its way out? An escape hatch, perhaps? And perhaps it understood that using it would likely mean a quick death. It bared its teeth. Henry Devlin, who had once won the American Psychiatric Association's Compassionate Caring Award for a New York Times op-ed piece called The End of Hate, bared his own in return. It felt good. Then he gave it the finger, for Beaver and for Pete. That felt good too. When he raised the carbine, the weasel, stupid perhaps, but not utterly stupid, dove out of sight. That was cool. Henry had never had the slightest intention of trying to shoot it through the door. He did like the idea of getting down there on the floor though. Close to the gas as you want to get, darling, he thought. He thumbed the carbine selector switch to full auto and fired a long burst into the gas tank. The sound of the gun was deafening. A huge, ragged hole appeared where the gasoline port had been. But for a moment there was nothing else. So much for the Hollywood version of how shit like this works, Henry thought. And then heard a hoarse whisper of sound, rising through a throaty hiss. He took 2 steps backward and his feet shot out from under him again. This time falling quite likely saved his eyesight, perhaps his life. The back of the Kurt's Humvee exploded only a second later, fire lashing out from underneath its big yellow petals. The rear tires jumped out of the snow. Glass sprayed through the snowy air, all of it going over Henry's head. Then the heat began to bake him, and he crawled away rapidly, dragging the carbine by its strap and laughing wildly. There was a second explosion and the air was filled with the whirling hooks of shrapnel. Henry got to his feet like a man climbing a ladder, using the lower branches of a handy tree as rungs. He stood, panting and laughing, legs aching, back aching, neck with an odd-sprung feeling. The entire back of Kurtz's Humvee was engulfed in flames. He could hear the thing inside, chittering furiously as it burned. He made a wide circle to the passenger side of the blazing Humvee and aimed the carbine at the broken window. He stood there for a moment, frowning, then realized why it seemed so stupid. All the windows in the Humvee were broken now, all the glass but the windshield. He began to laugh again. What a dork he was. What a total dork. Through the hell of flames in Humvee's cabin, he could still see the weasel lurching back and forth like a drunk. How many rounds did he have left in the clip if the fucking thing did come out? 50? 20? 5? However many rounds were there, it would have to be enough. He wouldn't risk retreating to Owen's Humvee for another clip. But the thing never came out. Henry stood guard for 5 minutes, then stretched it to 10. The snow fell and the Humvee burned, pouring black smoke into the white sky. Henry stood there thinking of the Derry Days Parade, Gary U.S. Bonds singing New Orleans, and here comes a tall man on stilts. Here comes the legendary cowboy, and how excited Duddits had been, jumping right up and down, thinking of Pete standing outside DGHS, hands cupped, pretending to smoke, waiting for the rest of them. Pete, whose plan had been to captain NASA's first manned Mars expedition, thinking of Beaver and his Fonzie jacket, Beav and his toothpicks, Beav singing to Duddits, Baby Boat's a Silver Dream. Beav hugging Jonesy at Jonesy's wedding and saying Jonesy had to be happy. He had to be happy for all of them. Jonesy. When Henry was absolutely sure the weasel was dead, incinerated, he started up the path to see if Jonesy was still alive. He didn't hold out much hope of that, but he discovered he hadn't given up hope either. The only pain pinned Jonesy to the world, and at first he thought the haggard, sooty-cheeked man kneeling beside him had to be a dream or a final figment of his imagination, because the man appeared to be Henry. "Jonesy! Hey, Jonesy! Are you there?" Henry snapped his fingers in front of Jonesy's eyes. "Earth to Jonesy!" "Henry? Is it you? Is it really?" "It's me," Henry said. He glanced at the dog, still partly stuck into the crack at the top of shaft 12, then back at Jonesy. He brushed Jonesy's sweat-soaked hair off his forehead with infinite tenderness. "Man, it took you," Jonesy began, and then the world wavered. He closed his eyes, concentrated hard, then opened them again. "It took you long enough to get back from this store. Did you remember the bread?" "Yeah, but I lost the hot dogs." "What a fucking pisser." Jonesy took a long and wavering breath. "I'll go myself next time." "Kiss my bender, pal," Henry said, and Jonesy slipped into darkness, smiling. Epilogue. Labor Day. Another summer down the tubes, Henry thought. There was nothing sad about the thought, though. Summer had been good, and fall would have been good too. No hunting this year, and there would be undoubtedly be the occasional visit from his new military friends. His new military friends wanted to be sure above all things that he wasn't growing any red foliage on his skin. But fall would be good just the same. Cool air, bright days, long nights. Sometimes in the cold midnight hours of his nights, Henry's old friends still came to visit. When it did, he simply sat up in his study with a book in his lap and waited for it to go again. Eventually it always did. Eventually the sun always came up. The sleep you didn't get one night sometimes came to you on the next, and then it came like a lover. This was something he had learned since last November. He was drinking a beer on the porch of Jonesy and Carla's cottage in Bear, the one on the shore of Pepper Pond. The south end of the Quabbin Reservoir was about 4 miles northwest to where he sat, and E Street, of course. The hand holding the can of Coors only had 3 fingers. He lost the 2 on the end to frostbite, perhaps while skiing out the deep-cut road from Hole in the Wall, perhaps while dragging Jonesy back to the remaining highway on a lashed-out-together traver. Last fall had been his season to drag people through the snow, it seemed, and with mixed results. Near the little scrape of beach, Carla Jones was tending a barbecue. Noel, the baby, was toddling around the picnic table, diaper sagging. He was waving a charred hot dog cheerily in one hand. The other 3 Jones kids, ranging in ages 11 to 3, were in the water, splashing around and yelling at each other. Henry supposed there might be some value to that biblical imperative about being fruitful and multiplying, but it seemed to him that Jonesy and Carla had taken it to absurd lengths. Behind him, the screen door clapped. Jonesy came out, carrying a bucket filled with iced beers. His limp wasn't all that bad. This time the dog had just said, "Fuck the original equipment," and had replaced the whole thing with steel and Teflon. It would have come to that anyway, the dog had told Jonesy. But if you had been a little more careful, Chief, you could have gotten another 5 years out of the old one. He had the operation in February, shortly after Henry and Jonesy's 6-week vacation with the military intelligence and PSYOPs people had ended. The military folks had offered to throw in the hip replacement, courtesy of Uncle Sam, sort of a coda to their debriefing. But Jonesy had refused with thanks, saying he wouldn't want to deprive his own orthopedist of the work or his insurance company of the bill. By then, all the 2 of them had wanted was to get out of Wyoming. The apartments were nice, if you could get used to living underground, that was. The food was 4-star. Jonesy put on 10 pounds, Henry put on close to 20, and the movies were always first run. The atmosphere, however, was just a teensy bit on the Dr. Strangelove side. For Henry, those 6 weeks had been infinitely worse than they had been for Jonesy. Jonesy suffered, but mostly with his derailed hip. His memories of sharing a body with Mr. Gray had faded to a consistency of dreams in an remarkably short space of time. Henry's memories, on the other hand, had only grown stronger. Those of the barn were the worst. The debriefers had been compassionate, not a Kurds in the bunch, but Henry couldn't block his thoughts of Bill and Marsha and Darren Childs, Mr. Bomber joined from Newton. They often came to visit in his dreams. So did Owen Underhill. "Reinforcements," Jonesy said, setting the bucket of beer down. Then he lowered himself into the sagging cane-bottomed rocker beside Henry with a grunt and a grimace. "One more and I'm done," Henry said. "I'm driving back to Portland in an hour or so, and an OUI I don't need." "Stay the night," Jonesy said, watching Noel. The baby had plumped down on the grass beneath the picnic table and now seemed intent upon inserting the remains of his hot dog into his navel. "With your kids squabbling their way toward midnight and maybe beyond?" Henry asked. "Getting my pick of Mario Bava horror movies?" "I've pretty well signed off the fright flicks," Jonesy said. "We're having a Kevin Costner festival tonight, starting with The Bodyguard." "Thought you said no horror movies." Smartass. Then he shrugged and grinned. "Whatever you feel." Henry raised his beer can. "Here's to absent friends." Jonesy raised his own. "Absent friends." They clinked cans and drank. "How's Roberta?" Jonesy asked. Henry smiled. "Doing very well. I had my doubts at the funeral." Jonesy nodded. At Durrett's funeral they had flanked her. And that had been a good thing, because Roberta had hardly been able to stand on her own. But now she's coming on strong, talking about opening a craft shop. I think it's a good idea. Of course, she misses him after Alfie died. Duds was her life. He was ours too, Jonesy said. Yes, I suppose he was. I feel so bad about the way we left him on his own all those years. I mean, he had leukemia, and we didn't even fucking know. Sure we knew, Henry said. Jonesy looked at him, eyebrows raised. Hey, Henry, Carla called. How do you want your burger? Cooked, he yelled back. I will make it so, sir. Would you be a love and get the baby? That hot dog's rapidly turning into a dirt dog. Take it away from him and give him to his dad. Henry went down the steps, fished Noel out from some under the table, and carried him back toward the porch. Annie? Noel cried brightly. He was now 18 months old. Henry stopped, feeling a chill spread up his back. It was as if he had been hailed by a ghost. E4, Annie, E4. Noel bopped Henry briskly on the nose with his dirt dog to underline the thrust of his thesis. I will wait for my burger, thanks, he said, and resumed walking. No eat my food? Annie eat his own food, honey bunch. But maybe I ought to have that nasty thing. You can have another one as soon as they're ready. He tweezed the dirt dog out of Noel's little hand, then plumped him down in Jonesy's lap and resumed his seat. By the time Jonesy had finished swabbing mustard and ketchup out of his son's belly button, the kid was almost asleep. What do you mean, sure we knew? Jonesy asked. Jonesy, come on. Maybe we left him or tried. But do you think Duddits ever left us? After all that happened, do you really believe that? Very slowly, Jonesy shook his head. Some of it was growing up, growing apart. But some of it was the Richie Granado thing. What worked on us all the way. That worked us the way the business of Rapalo's serving platter worked on Owen Underhill. Jonesy didn't need to ask what it meant. In Wyoming, they had had all the time they needed to catch up on each other's story. There is an old poem about the man trying to outrun God, Henry said. The Hound of Heaven, it's called. Duddits wasn't God, God forbid. But he was our hound. We ran as fast as we could, but we could never run off the Dreamcatcher, could we? Jonesy said. None of us could do that. And then they came, the Byram, stupid spores and spaceships built by some other race. Is that what they were? All they were? I don't think we'll ever know. Only one question got answered last fall. For centuries we have looked up at the stars and asked ourselves, if we are alone in the universe, well now we know we are not. Big whoop, huh? Gerritsen, do you remember Gerritsen? Jonesy nodded. Of course he remembered Terry Gerritsen, Navy psychologist in charge of the Wyoming debriefing team, always joking about how typical it was that Uncle Sammy would post him to a place where the nearest water was Lar Kilbourne's cow wallow. Gerritsen and Henry had become close. Not quite friends, only because the situation didn't quite allow it. Jonesy and Henry had been well treated in Wyoming, but they hadn't been guests. Still, Henry Devlin and Terry Gerritsen were professional colleagues, and such things made a difference. Gerritsen started by assuming two questions had been answered: that we are not alone in the universe, and that we are not the only intelligent beings in the universe. I labored hard to convince him that the second postulate was based on faulty logic, a house built on sand. I don't think I entirely succeeded in getting through, but I may have planted a seed of doubt at least. Whatever else the Byram may be, they are not shipbuilders, and the race that built the ships may be gone. Maybe in fact be Byram themselves by now. Mr. Gray wasn't stupid. Not once he got inside your head. That much I agree with. Mr. Grey was you, Jonesy. He stole your emotions, your memories, your taste of bacon. I don't need it anymore. I'm not surprised. He also stole your basic personality. That included the subconscious kinks. Whatever there is in you that like the Mario Bava horror movies or the Sergio Leone westerns, whatever it is that got off on fear and the violence. Man, Mr. Grey loved that shit. And why wouldn't he? Those things were primitive survival tools. As the last of his kind in the hostile environment, he grabbed every damn tool he could lay his hands on. Bullshit! Jonesy's dislike of his idea was plain on his face. It's not. At Hole in the Wall, you saw what you expected to see, which was an X-Files / Close Encounters of the Third Kind alien. You inhaled the virus. I have no doubt there was at least that much physical contact, but you were completely immune to it. As we now know, at least 50% of the human race seems to be. What you caught was an intention, a kind of a blind imperative. Fuck, there's no word for it because there's no word for them. But I think it got in because you believed it was there. You were telling me, looking at Henry over the top of his sleeping son's head, that I almost destroyed the human race because I had a hysterical pregnancy? Oh no, Henry said. If that had been all, it would have been passed off, would have been amounted to no more than a fugue. But in you, the idea of Mr. Grey, it stuck like a fly in a spider web. It stuck in the Dreamcatcher. Yes! They fell quiet. Soon Carla would call them, and they would eat hot dogs and hamburgers, potato salad and watermelon beneath the blue shield of the infinitely permeable sky. And you will say that it's all coincidence, Jonesy asked. That they just happened to come down in the Jefferson Tract, and I happened to be there? And not just me either. You and Peter and Beeve plus Duddits, just a couple of 100 miles to the south. Don't forget that, because it was Duddits who held us together. Duddits was always a sword with two edges, Henry said. Josie Rickenhauer on one, Duddits the finder, Duddits the savior, Richie Granadu on the other, Duddits the killer. Only Duddits needed us to help him kill. I'm sure of that. We were the ones with the deeper subconscious layer. We supplied the hate and fear. The fear that Richie would get us, the way he promised he would. We always had more of the dark stuff than Duds. His idea of being mean was counting your crib backward, and that was more on the spurs of fun than anything else. Still, do you remember the time Pete pulled Duddits' hat over his eyes and Duddits walked into the wall? Jonesy did vaguely. Out of the mall that had been, when they had been young and the mall had been a place to go. Same shit, different day. For quite a while after that, Pete lost whenever we played the Duddits game. Duddits always counted him backward, and none of us tipped to it. We probably thought it was just a coincidence, but in light of everything, I know now. I tend to doubt that. You think even Duddits knew payback's a bitch? He learned it from us, Jonesy. Duddits gave Mr. Grey his foothold, his mindhold. Yeah, but he also gave you a stronghold, a place where you could hide from Mr. Grey. Don't forget that. No, Jonesy thought, he would never forget that. All of it honored and started with Duddits, Henry said. We've been odd, Jonesy, ever since we knew him. You know it's true. The things with Richie Granadu were the only big things, the things that stood out. If you look back over your life, you will see other things, I'm sure of it. Defuniak, Jonesy murmured. Who's that? The kid I caught cheating just before my accident. I caught him even though I wasn't there on the day the test was given. You see? But in the end, it was Duddits who broke the little grey son of a bitch. I'll tell you something else. I think Duddits saved my life at the end of E Street. I think it's entirely possible that even Kurtz's sidekick looked into the back of the Humvee at us The first time I'm talking about, he had little duddits in his head saying, "Don't worry, old horse, go on about your business, they dead." But Jonesy had not left his earlier thought. And are we supposed to believe that the Byram connecting with us, of all the people in the world, was just random coincidence? Because that's what Gerritsen believed. He never said it in so many words, but his take on it was clear enough. Why not? There are scientists, brilliant men like Stephen Jay Gould, who believe that our own species exists thanks to an even longer and more improbable chain of coincidences. Is that what you believe? Henry lifted his hands. He hardly knew how to reply without invoking God, who had crept back into his life over these last few months, by the back door, as it were, in the dead of many sleepless nights. Did one have to evoke that old Deus ex machina to make sense of this? What I believe is that Duddits is us, Jonesy. Race, species, genus, game, set, and match. We are in our sum, Duddits, and all our noblest aspirations come down to no more than keeping track of the yellow lunchbox and learning to put our shoes in the right way. Fit wa, fit Neek. Our wickedest motions in a cosmic sense come down to no more than counting someone's crib, pegging it backward, then playing dumb about it. Jonesy was regarding him with fascination. That's neither inspiring or horrible, I can't tell which. And it doesn't matter. Jonesy thought about this, then asked, if we're Duddits, who sings to us? Who sings the lullaby? Helps to go to sleep when we are sad and scared. Oh, God still does that, Henry said, and could have kicked himself, there it was, out in spite of all his intentions. And did God keep that last weasel out of shaft well? Because if that thing had got into the water, Henry, technically the weasel that had incubated inside of Perlmutter had actually been the last, but it was a fine point, a hair that needed no splitting. It would have caused trouble, I don't dispute that. For a couple of years, whether or not to tear down Fenway Park would have been the least of Boston's concerns, but destroy us? I don't think so. We were a new thing to them. Mr. Gray knew it. Those tapes of you under hypnosis. Don't talk about those. Jonesy had listened to 2 of them and believed doing so had been the biggest mistake he'd made during his time in Wyoming. Listening to himself speak as Mr. Gray, under deep hypnosis to become Mr. Gray, had been like listening to a malevolent ghost. There were times when he thought he might be the only man on earth who truly understood what it is to be raped. Some things were better forgotten. Sorry. Jonesy waved his hand to show it was okay. Not a problem, but had paled considerably. All I'm saying is that, to be greater or lesser degree, we are a species living in the Dreamcatcher. I hate the way that sounds. Phony transcendentalism rings on the air like pure tin. But we don't have the right words for this part of it either. We may have to invent some eventually, but in the meantime, Dreamcatcher will have to do. Dreamcatcher will have to do. Henry turned up in his seat. Jonesy did the same, shifting Noel a little bit on his lap. A Dreamcatcher hung over the door to the cabin. Henry had bought it as a house present, and Jonesy had put it up once, like a Catholic peasant, nailing a crucifix to the door of his cottage during the time of vampires. Maybe they were all just drawn to you, Henry said. To us, the way flowers turn to follow the sun, or the way iron filings line up when they feel the pull of a magnet. We can't tell for sure because the Byram is so different from us. Will they be back? Oh yes, Henry said. Them or others. He looked up at the blue sky of his late summer day. Somewhere in the distance, toward the Quabbin Reservoir, an eagle screamed. I think you can take that to the bank, but not today. Guys! Carla shouted. Lunch is ready! Henry took Noel from Jonesy. For a moment, their hands touched, their eyes touched, and their minds touched. For a moment, they saw the line. Henry smiled. Jonesy smiled back. When they walked down the steps and across the lawn by the side, Jonesy limping, Henry with the sleeping child in his arms. And for that moment, the only darkness was their shadows trailing behind them on the grass. Lowell, Maine, May 29th, 2000. This brings the end of this wonderful book, Stephen King's Dreamcatcher. Thank you for listening, and I will see you soon on the next book.